Weinstein, this freedom of religion, should just be freedom from Christianity is what they should call it, to be honest. And there's tolerance for everything but Christians. And it's amazing to me. So we have, as Christians, a big job. We have a tough job ahead of us. Okay? You see, we are to be the salt. We are to be the light of the world. We're supposed to be a light that's shining upon a hill. It is, I never thought I'd say this, and I mentioned it this morning, and young people, I don't say this to frighten you, but it is what it is. There is a distinct possibility that within my lifetime we'll face persecution. We're already facing it in mild forms, but I'm talking about in extreme forms. There is that possibility. I read recently where a poll said that 3 out of 10 U.S. citizens think that an armed revolution may be necessary eventually to get our freedoms back. Don't let that on the internet. They'll think I'm preaching that, and I'm not saying it's time for anything like that. I hope that time never comes. I'm just saying that's where our nation is headed, that mentality, and outright against the Christians. And so we look at it, we say, well, man, what are we supposed to do? Well, I'm glad you asked. I said most of it this morning, we're to seek God. We're to humble ourselves. We're to pray. In 2 Chronicles 7:14, when he said to do that, he said, if my people, which are called by my name. Well, in that, he said, turn from their wicked ways. And our wicked ways, many of us think, oh, well, that's talking about those outrage, that fornication and drugging it up and doing this, that, and the other. No, some of the wickedness is just maybe you lost your first love. He told them in the book of Revelation, that church, he said, I forget which one it was now. He said, you've lost your first love. Anyways, he said, repent. Turn from it. Get back to where you were. So we're to be doing that. We should be examining ourselves and making sure, hey, am I right with God? You see, for our nation to be right, first I have to be right. Okay? I can't be pointing at everybody else and say, well, if our White House would get right, if our Congress and our Senate would get right. No. God said, if my people, which are called by my name, so if Christians would just get right. And if we had become sober-minded about this thing of serving God once again and get close to God and walk with Him, it's a wonderful walk. Joshua chapter 13, verse number 1. The Bible said, now Joshua was stricken in years, or was old and stricken in years. And the Lord said unto him, thou art old and stricken in years. Man, that's really encouraging from the Lord, isn't it, right there? And notice it said it twice in this verse. When Joshua was old and stricken in years, the Lord said, Joshua, you're old, you're stricken in years. And there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. You hear what he's saying? Joshua, you are old and stricken in years. It reminds me of when he said about Abraham. I believe it's in Hebrews where it uses this terminology, how it said that he promised a seed. He promised it to a man that was as good as dead. How would you like to be described as that? Oh, he's as good as dead. And so he says, Joshua, you are old, and there's much land to be possessed. Joshua, you're old, you're stricken in years, you're feeble, you're losing your strength, but Joshua, I still have a task for you to do. Joshua most likely was between 90 years old and 100 years old of age. He was well beyond the point of where most people would consider the retirement should occur. Hey, it's just time for me to kind of kick back and relax. Yet, even at this age, God had a work for Joshua to do. But there was a problem. The problem was he was old and stricken in years. This was an undeniable problem. There's no way to gloss over it. It's between 90 and 100 years old. He was indeed old. Nothing could refute the fact. Joshua's old. By the way, many of us have some undeniable problems that we're facing. Some of those problems are there because of our own doing. We've made some stupid mistakes, made some stupid decisions. We've chosen to follow our own desires rather than the desires of the Lord, and it's got us in a mess, and we have some problems. Some of our problems we can't help. If you are getting older, hey, we can't help the aging process. Some of our health problems, we can't help that. And there's some undeniable problems. Some of us are weak, aren't we? Others are troubled. Some have financial difficulties. Some have physical infirmities. It's an undeniable thing. Joshua's problem here was also an unavoidable problem. Nothing that Joshua could have done would have prevented him from getting old. The only alternative to old age is death. That's the only alternative. And so there's nothing he could do could have done to avoid this. And some of the problems we face, there's nothing we could do to avoid them. Listen, I'm 43. I'm still young. At least I'm going to tell myself that. I'm still young. My boys will let me know that I'm not. But I still feel that I'm young. And there's nothing I could have done maybe growing up to avoid where our nation is right now. I mean, it is what it is. It's a product of many years of getting to this point. It's unavoidable. His problem, hey, be honest, it was an unchangeable problem. There was no potion that Joshua was going to be able to drink. He could have said, now, Lord, would you give me my youth back? But chances are that wasn't going to happen either. It was an unchangeable problem. Listen, whether we like it or not, some of our problems are, for all practical purposes, unchangeable. Now, we know that nothing is out of the realm of possibility with God. But for all practical purposes, our problems, some of them may be unchangeable. One would think, in fact, that God, here with Joshua, was about to retire him. Okay, Joshua, you're between 90 and 100 years old. And so, listen, you're just going to come on to heaven. He had a problem. But then God reminded Joshua of his potential. Joshua, you're old and stricken in years. Come on home. He could have done that. But what does God do instead? He said, Joshua, you're old, you're stricken in years, and there remaineth very much land to be possessed. Far from telling Joshua that his work was over and his ministry was done, God reminded him that hey, Joshua, yeah, you're old, you're stricken in age, but there's a lot left to do. Listen, I don't know what it is you may be facing, what problems it is, what hindrances, what obstacles, but let me tell you, however old you are, however bad your health is, if your lungs are still drawing breath, then God has a work to be done, and you can get that job done. Look in chapter 13, verse 7. It says, now therefore, divide this land for an inheritance unto the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh. He said, Joshua, you're old, stricken in years. However, there's a purpose still. There's still something that needs to be done. There's a whole lot of land that needs to be possessed. And Joshua, I want you to participate. Even today, in spite of our problems and in the face of our difficulties, and with full awareness of our infirmities, God requires us to participate in possessing the land. Listen, if America is going to be turned around, God requires it of the Christians to participate in that. You realize that? If God's going to bless my home, then God requires that I participate in that effort. God renews His promise. Listen, God, I think I'm getting ahead. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me keep going here. God then renews His promise to Joshua and to the children of Israel. He says, listen, Joshua, you are old and stricken in years, yet there's a big work for you to be done. But God, look, I'm getting old and stricken in years. It's time for me to retire. I just want to come on home to heaven. No, Joshua, there's a work to be done, and as long as you're sucking breath, I want you to participate. There is something that you can do. Now, let me ask you, what is it that you're doing? Because there's something you can do. Well, I'm waiting for somebody else to come and do it. No, somebody else never comes. That doesn't happen. When we sit around and wait for somebody else to get it done, usually it doesn't get done. And He renews His promise. It's interesting to note here that the land now being divided, it was still occupied by the enemy. In instructing Joshua to divide this land, God was once again reiterating His truth that this was to be the inheritance of the people. God's reestablishing that promise. He said, Joshua, here's what I want you to do. Here's the promised land. You haven't taken it all over yet. I want you, here's your part, divide the land up for the people. Hey, but God, it's still inhabited by the wicked, by the heathen. I know, but Joshua, didn't I tell you? I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to the people. Now, they're going to have to fight for it, Joshua. But I'm going to give it to them. And Joshua, yes, there are going to be some obstacles. There's going to be some things that stand in the way. Joshua, I know right now to y'all, it looks like an insurmountable problem. There's no way you'll be able to overcome. But Joshua, I've not let you down before, and I will not let you down in the future. Often when we think that God's let us down, it's not Him that let us down. We let Him down somewhere along the line. We gave up on Him. Here's some principles I want to look at this evening. Number one, the principles of obstacles. We pray and we ask God to remove the obstacles, but listen, sometimes God put those obstacles there for a purpose. He's not always going to remove the obstacles. Many times those obstacles are there to make us stronger and so that He can show Himself strong. Someone has well said that God's promises are half held and half hope. On the one hand, God promised the land. He says, I'm going to give you the vineyards already planted. I'm going to give you these olive orchards with and houses and the olives are already producing, the grapes are already producing, the houses are already built. I'm going to give you all that. Man, that's great, God. How are we going to do it? Well, you're going to have to fight for it. Oh, but wait a minute, God, that doesn't sound good. I mean, they're giants to us. We look like grasshoppers in their sight. That's problems to me. And no, listen, I'm going to give you the land with the vineyards and the olives and the houses already built, land full of milk and honey. That's great. Okay, God, are you going to run the people out? No, you're going to fight for it. You're going to fight for this land. I'll be with you in the fight. Look, folks, I spoke this morning once again about our nation. And I'll be honest, it looks like too big a problem for a couple hundred people in Mount Olive to overcome, doesn't it? Hey, but we've got a big God. And my God is not bound to Mount Olive. My God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. And I do know that even if persecution does come, God will be with me in that persecution. Man, I read some more this week about how our spiritual forefathers suffered for Christ. And many of them, listen, I can't imagine it. And because we have young ones in here, I'll not go in. You read Fox's Book of Martyrs and some of the things they endured. And how they endured it sometimes with a smile on their face. How they endured it while singing. How they endured it sometimes praying for those that were persecuting them. I pray, God, I don't know if persecution will come in my time. But here's what I'm praying, God. Whether it does or not, would you increase my faith and help my relationship to be close enough to you that if it does come, I will not falter in the persecution. You know, isn't it easy to say, oh, I would suffer for Christ. Hey, look, we get a little headache when we won't show up to church. Isn't that right? We stub our little pinky toe on a door jamb, and I'm going to have to stay home, soak this bad boy in some Epsom salts, take a few Valium, I've stubbed my toe. Hey, we say, oh yeah, boy, they put that cold blue steel against my head and say, deny Christ or I'll blow your brains out. Well, I'll not deny Christ. Yeah, I'm glad you feel that confident. I hope that I won't deny Christ. I don't know. Hey, you remember some years back what they did to some of our servicemen? Was that in Iraq? You remember how they killed them? With the knife? Cut their heads off? I had some friends that saw the video of it. Heard their screams. And I think, man, so I pray this, Lord, let me be so close to you that whether persecution comes or not, I'll be able to endure if it does come. I want to be that close to Him. And we say, hey, this is such a big problem, but hey, I've got a big God. But Pastor, there's some big obstacles. God's able to help us through those obstacles. In Joshua chapter 17, verses 17 through 18, he says this, "And Joshua spake unto the house of Joseph, even to Ephraim and to Manasseh, saying, Thou art a great people, and hast great power. Thou shalt not have one lot only. But the mountain shall be thine, for it is a wood, and thou shalt cut it down, and the outgoings of it shall be thine. For thou shalt drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots, and though they be strong." So you hear what he says? He says to Manasseh and to Ephraim, listen, you're not just going to have one lot, you're going to have two areas, and I'm going to give you the mountain, and here's what I want you to do. You go chop the wood, you bring the wood out, you're going to build the things you need, you're going to fight the armies. Oh, but God, they have iron chariots. That was a big deal in that day. That'd be like us saying, well, I have a tank, and you've got a BB gun. And he said, well, they have iron chariots. He said, I know, and you're going to wipe them out anyway. Oh, but God, they're strong. I know. God, can't you just run them out? Yes, I can. Will you? Nope, not this time. You're going to have to fight. The people are told, yes, you can have the additional lot, but you've got to cut down the wood yourself. You're going to have to drive out the iron chariots yourself. Hey, do you realize, folks, there's always problems in the work of God? How many of you work a job? Okay. How many of you, Jeremiah, Josiah, y'all, the lawn care business, right? I'm familiar with lawn care business. I'm sure that you have never, when you've been out cutting grass, ever had any problems with your equipment, have you? You've never had any problems with your equipment? Yeah. Hey, I'm sure. You ever had a weed eater break down on you? You ever had a mower break down on you? You ever have a mower break down to where it would not go anywhere? Did you have to get it up on the trailer? That's not easy, is it? How to do that this week? Did you ever have something break down and you did not have a backup piece of equipment? Has that happened to you? Oh, yeah. Well, hey, there's problems in anything we do, so what'd you do? You say, oh, forget it. Did you take the weed eater and just chunk it out in the road and say, forget it, I'll never cut grass again? You wanted to, didn't you? You wanted to. Did you just get a match, open the gas tank on the mower that broke down, just drop a match and walk away? Probably wanted to. But no, we say, okay, here's a problem. What are we going to do? I'm going to overcome this problem. God help me. You know that in the work of the Lord there's problems also. Why is it that we're so quick when we run into opposition, we run into obstacles in the work of the Lord that we say, well, that's too hard, I can't do it. Well, that's too tough right there. We run into family problems. Well, especially in this day and hour, we run into family problems, spousal problems, and people say, well, that's it. I'm out the back door. I'll go find me another one. Hey, let me tell you something. The problem may not have been your spouse, Jack. It may have been you. All right? Carson, I know you're laughing because I said Jack, aren't you? Okay. They're told that you can have all this, but you're going to have the obstacles. Those obstacles were there. They were the will of God. Sometimes those obstacles in our life, they're part of the will of God. Remember what Caleb told Israel when they first refused to enter the promised land? You remember what he said of the giants? He said, hey, they are bread for us. In other words, hey, we're going to fight them, we're going to win. It's just going to make us that much more strong. So what is it that God has for you to do? And what obstacle is standing in your way? You're just going to roll over and let it stay there? The same God that brought you up to that obstacle is the same God that will help you over that obstacle, or under the obstacle, or through the obstacle. Principle of opportunity. Not just obstacles, but opportunity. Joshua, he said, Joshua, listen, you're 90 to 100 years old, but I have an opportunity for you. For me? Man, it's time for me to just pass on. I have an opportunity. I want you to divide the land. Now listen, that wouldn't have been a simple task. Okay? I want you to divide the land. But God, I'm not even convinced these people want to take the land. Joshua, that's not what. Here's an opportunity for you, buddy. You know, I don't know that there's a church in America that could honestly say, that could not honestly say, there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. There is still a whole lot for us to do. They'll say, well, man, how'd you moved from Charlotte to Mount Olive? Man, I bet there's just not as much to do there, is there? Man, there's plenty to do. I especially hear young people say, well, there's just not much to do around here. Well, hey, wear my boots for a while. Dad, I'm bored. Well, enjoy it. Learn to enjoy some boredom. How many of you got to where you're so busy that you just enjoy a little bit of boredom? Anybody like that? Oh, yeah, man, just a little bit. Give me a little bit of boredom, man. It's fun. Boredom is fun. Opportunity. General Douglas MacArthur said this once. He said, he said that a man is old when he begins to look backwards instead of looking forward. Hey, we've got a choice. We can look forward and enjoy God's blessings, just like God said, hey, Joshua, don't look back at what's behind you. Look right here. I still have more for you to do. Or we can look backward and forfeit what God wants us to do today. Hey, listen to this guy right here. Listen to a story about this guy. I'm going to read you a little story here. When Henry Fawcett was 20 years old, his father accidentally discharged a shotgun on a hunting trip, blinding his son in both eyes. Before the accident, Henry had been a bright, ambitious young man with a great future. No one could have blamed him or would have blamed him if the accident had made him bitter and full of despair. And in fact, that's what happened at first. But there was one thing that saved him. He loved his father deeply and knew that his father was nearly out of his mind with grief over what he had done to his son. The only way that he could save his father's sanity was to choose hope over despair himself, and so he did. He pretended to take an interest in life, which he did not feel. He pretended to have hope that he did not possess, and believed that he could be a useful citizen, though he felt that such was not possible. Then an amazing thing happened. The pretense turned into reality. It was as if by an act of will he had changed his total life. As a result, Henry Fawcett was elected to Parliament in England and later became Postmaster General, where he brought about great improvements in the English postal and telegraph system. Here's a guy, he said, hey, I've lost my hearing. I had a lot going for me, and boy, it's really damaged me, but you know what? I'm still alive. And so while I'm alive, I'm going to do what I can do. One of my favorite poems in all the world is a poem called Opportunity by Edward Rowland Sill. Anybody ever heard that poem, Opportunity? Oh, I love this poem. Listen to this right here. It doesn't rhyme, so don't let that disappoint you, okay? This I beheld, or dreamed it in a dream. There spread a cloud of dust along the plain, and underneath the cloud, or in it, raged a furious battle, and men yelled, and swords shot upon swords and shields. A prince's banner wavered, then staggered backward, hemmed by the foes. A craven hung along the battle's edge and thought, had I a sword of keener steel, that blue blade that the king's son bears? But this blunt thing, he snapped and flung it from his hand, and lowering crept away and left the field. Then came the king's son, wounded, sore-bested, and weaponless, and saw the broken sword, hilt buried in the dry and trodden sand, and ran and snatched it, and with battle shout lifted afresh, he hewed his enemy down and saved a great cause that heroic day. Do you hear what happened? I love that poem. Here's the king and his son's fighting and battling. And in the meantime, this cowardly guy's over the edge saying, boy, if I had a sword like his, mine's broken, this old piece of junk. But if I had a sword like the king's son, that blue steel, boy, that tough steel, boy, then I could really do some damage. But this old stinking thing, he throws it down and he wanders off the field. In the meantime, the king's son is driven back. He's in dire straits and he's weaponless now. And he looks down and sees the broken sword and he runs and he grabs it. Hey, he doesn't have much, but that's all he has. And he raises a shout and he fights off the enemy and saves the cause that day. Hey, why didn't the little cowardly guy do that? He had just as much opportunity. Folks, the fact that we're drawing wind with our lungs and that our heart is still pumping blood through us and we still can open our eyes in the morning and get out of bed tells me that we have an opportunity to serve God. But Pastor, you don't understand what I'm going through and the problems that I face and the obstacles I have to overcome. Hey, I haven't been there, but I do understand this, that because you're alive, that is opportunity for you to put God to the test and see God do a great thing with you and through you and for you if you'll seize the opportunity. Joshua, you're old and stricken in years. There's still a whole lot of land to possess. So start divvying it up, buddy. God, I'm old. Joshua, I'm giving you an opportunity. Notice that God did not ask Joshua to volunteer. Hey, Joshua, would you like to do this? I said, Joshua, here's what you're going to do. He didn't suggest that it might be nice if he would possess more land. He didn't hint that perhaps it would be good if Joshua decided to go forward. He commanded him to possess the rest of the land. Hey, did you know that we too are commanded to go and possess land? Listen, folks, we have an obligation to get the work done for God. Hello? Anybody out there? Out there? Hey, we have an obligation to be telling people about Christ. We have an obligation to be standing for what's right. We have an obligation as Christians to lift our voices. Hey, in the school system, we have an obligation to lift our voices. In our communities, in our government, as citizens of this nation, we have an obligation, hey, not to be belligerent and nasty and unchristian, but with the Christian graces to stand and say, hey, listen, this is right. And that is wrong. We're going to stay with what's right. Boy, it disturbs me when celebrities that are Christian, like the Tim Tebow who takes a stand for Christ, is criticized and berated while this Collins guy comes out to be openly homosexual basketball player, and he gets a call from the White House congratulating him for his courage. Hey, what about Tim Tebow's courage? He's the one undergoing the attacks. Hey, what about the preachers in this nation? Their courage for standing what's right. They're the ones undergoing the attacks. While everybody says, oh, we're so happy for you. Hey, what about that Broussard guy? I don't know. I've never heard him until just recently. That ESPN sports he's a something in there. Analyst. Who said when asked about this, is it Jason Collins? Yeah, asked about how do you feel about this? He said there on television. I mean, right, he put himself out there, folks. He says, well, I respect him. He's a friend of mine. I've eaten lunch with him. But I think that that's a sin. And anybody that lives that sin and flaunts that sin and lives in it unrepentantly, then they're living in open rebellion to God. He said, I'm not saying he should be fired. He shouldn't be allowed to play. I'm just saying it's a sin. Evidently, Jason Collins has professed that he is a Christian, and they asked Broussard about that, and Broussard said, well, I do not believe that the Bible can characterize anybody that openly lives in that sin or any other immoral sin, openly, without repentance, just openly doing. He says it's different when people fall and get back up, but just openly living in it, not caring of the results. He said, I don't think the Bible would characterize them as a Christian. Well, yeah, tell them. Mr. Broussard, I guarantee he didn't get a call from the White House about his courage. I guarantee he didn't. So we have a big job to do, folks. We are obligated, we're commanded to stand up and say this is right and this is wrong. But preacher, they might say bad things about us. Hey, look. They're saying bad things about us already. As I said this morning, I don't want to offend people by my disposition, but if I offend them by my position, then so be it. I mean, I can't change my position just because somebody don't like that. Well, Pastor, what are you going to do if persecution comes? Hey, I'd like to just say, hey, I'm going to charge hell with water pistols. That's what it takes. I do pray. Here's my prayer. That I'll be found faithful. That I will not cower. That I will possess the land. Listen, folks, there's a lot of unsaved people in our town. Just right here. This little town that's saturated with churches. In this county that is saturated with churches, this Tri-County area, there's churches everywhere, aren't And there's still a lot of lost people. When I first came here, I did not realize the hooks that the devil had in this area. I didn't know that way out here in the small towns, drugs would be so bad. I had no clue that they'd be so rampant. I had no idea that immorality would be as bad as it is in a small town, but it's there, isn't it? Folks, there's still a lot of land to possess. Yeah, there's some obstacles. Sure there are. Those obstacles sometimes are there to make us stronger, and sometimes they're there just to show how God or how strong our God is. You got a problem? You have some obstacles? Yeah, preacher, what do I do? Just keep on running. Just keep on fighting. Keep on taking the land. Don't give up. Everybody bow your head and close your eyes, please.